Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through the veil of time to walk alongside women whose daily existence has been hidden in the shadows of pyramids and pharaohs for thousands of years. You're about to experience something historians rarely discuss: the ordinary magic of Egyptian women's lives. The small moments that fill their days with meaning, struggle, and unexpected joy. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why ancient Egyptians were obsessed with cleanliness, or how women wielded power without ever sitting on a throne. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, or perhaps share what fascinates you most about ancient Egypt. Your engagement helps us create more journeys like this one. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. The darkness is beginning to thin. You feel it before you see it, that subtle shift in the air that tells you dawn is approaching. Your eyes open slowly, adjusting to the deep blue darkness of pre-dawn Egypt. You're lying on a wooden bed frame, woven with rope or leather strips, a linen sheet draped across your body. The mattress beneath you is stuffed with straw, and though it's far from soft by modern standards, you've never known anything different. A wooden headrest supports your neck, carved and curved in a way that seemed strange at first but now feels natural. Around you, the mudbrick walls of your home still hold the coolness of night. The house is small but sturdy. Its thick walls a defense against the scorching heat that will arrive in just a few hours. Historians still argue whether most Egyptian homes had windows or simply relied on high openings near the roof for ventilation. But your home has both small rectangular windows covered with wooden shutters and higher vents that allow hot air to escape. You hear stirring in the adjacent room. Your mother-in-law is already awake, as she always is, moving with the quiet confidence of a woman who has performed these dawn rituals for 50 years. You know you must rise soon, but for just a moment, you allow yourself to rest in this transitional space between sleep and waking, between the dream world the gods inhabit and the physical realm where you must labour. The air smells faintly of bread from yesterday's baking and the musky sweetness of the palm oil lamp that burned late into the evening. Outside, you hear the first bird calls the ibis and the dove beginning their morning songs. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance, and you know the village is waking. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, your feet finding the packed earth floor. In wealthier homes, there might be stone flooring or even decorative tiles, but here the ground is simply earth, swept clean and occasionally treated with water to keep the dust down. You stand reaching for the linen dress that hangs on a wooden peg driven into the wall. It's a simple sheath, really a tube of a fabric that you'll wrap around your body and secure at the shoulders. Some women wear pleated versions for special occasions, but for daily life, simplicity reigns. The linen feels cool against your skin as you dress. Egypt's climate demands breathable fabric, and linen made from flax grown along the Nile's fertile banks is perfect. The wealthy can afford finely woven, nearly transparent linen that drapes like water, but yours is coarser, more practical. Still, it's clean. Cleanliness isn't just preference in Egypt, it's nearly religious obligation, a fact that will define much of your morning routine. You move toward the small basin in the corner where water was left last night. The water is still relatively cool, drawn from the Nile or perhaps a nearby canal before sunset. You pour some over your hands, splashing it across your face, feeling the last remnants of sleep wash away. There's no soap as modern people know it instead. You'll use natron, that remarkable naturally occurring salt that Egyptians employ for everything from mummification to bathing, mixed with oil. It creates a cleansing paste that leaves your skin feeling fresh, if slightly tight. Your mother-in-law appears in the doorway, already fully dressed, her hair covered with a light cloth. She nods at you approval that you've risen at an appropriate hour and gestures toward the courtyard. There's work to be done before the sun climbs too high, before the heat becomes a living thing that makes every movement feel like wading through honey. Together, you step into the courtyard, the heart of your home. The sky is now shifting from deep blue to violet, and the first golden rays are beginning to paint the eastern horizon. Here, in this open space surrounded by the walls of your home, much of your daily life will unfold. There's a small oven for baking, a grinding stone for grain, storage jars for water and food, and a small shrine just a niche in the wall, really where a simple clay figure of Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess who protects women and children, keeps watch over your household. Your first task, as it is every morning, is to make offerings to Taweret and to the household gods. You take a small piece of bread saved from yesterday and a bit of beer, placing them at the shrine. You murmur a prayer, nothing elaborate, just a simple request for protection, for health, for fertility if you're trying to conceive, or for the safety of children if you already have them. Religion in Egypt isn't confined to grand temples, it lives here. In these small moments, in these quiet conversations with the divine that punctuate your day. The eastern sky is now streaked with orange and pink, and you know the sun god Ra is beginning his daily journey across the heavens. This astronomical event that moderns take for granted fills you with a sense of renewal and, if you're honest, relief. The night in Egypt is full of dangers both real and imagined. Scorpions, snakes, and the spirits that some believe wander in darkness. Dawn is safety returning, order reasserting itself over chaos. You return to the small room where you slept, but now your purpose is transformation. The basin of water awaits, and beside it, an array of tools and substances that would fascinate any modern cosmetics chemist. Your grooming routine isn't vanity, though vanity certainly plays a role. It's about protection, identity, and participating in a culture that views the body as a temple requiring constant maintenance. You begin with your hair, running your fingers through it to assess the night's damage. Egyptian women have complex relationships with their hair. Some keep it long, braiding it elaborately or allowing it to flow in thick waves down their backs. Others crop it short for practicality, especially in summer's oppressive heat. Historians still argue whether Egyptian women commonly wore wigs, or if that practice was reserved primarily for the elite and for special occasions. But you know from experience that many women in your village own at least one wig made from human hair, sheep's wool, or even plant fibres for festivals and important gatherings. Today, you'll wear your natural hair, but first it needs attention. You reach for a wooden comb, its teeth carved wide enough to navigate through your thick locks without breaking them. Combing isn't just about aesthetics, it's about removing any unwanted visitors that might have taken up residence overnight. Head lice are a common complaint, and prevention involves constant vigilance and treatments with various oils that make your hair smell pleasantly of almonds or castor. Once your hair is combed and smoothed, you apply a small amount of oil, perhaps castor oil or moringa oil, depending on what's available. The oil serves multiple purposes. It moisturizes your scalp, protects your hair from the sun's damaging rays, and gives your hair a lustrous sheen that Egyptian aesthetic sensibilities prize. You work it through with your fingers, feeling the oil warm and spread as you massage it into your roots. Now comes the face. And this is where your routine becomes almost ritualistic. You reach for your makeup palette, a flat stone surface, perhaps slate or limestone, with shallow depressions ground into it for mixing pigments. Beside it are small pots and jars containing the materials of transformation galena for black coal, malachite for green eye paint, red ochre for lips and cheeks, and various oils and fats to bind them. The eye makeup is paramount. You begin with the coal, grinding the galena into a fine powder and mixing it with a bit of animal fat or oil to create a smooth paste. Using a small wooden or ivory applicator, it looks almost like a tiny spatula. You carefully line your eyes, extending the line beyond the outer corners in that distinctive Egyptian style that makes the eyes appear larger, more luminous, more divine. This isn't merely cosmetic. The galena contains lead compounds that ancient Egyptians believed protected against eye infections. And modern research has confirmed that these lead salts actually stimulated immune responses that fought bacterial infections. Your ancestors stumbled upon antibacterial makeup millennia before anyone understood germ theory. But here's the quirky part that makes archaeologists chuckle. Some women applied so much coal that they essentially walked around with mild lead poisoning, which might have given them that dreamy, slightly disconnected look that poets sometimes described as divine. Beauty has always required sacrifice. Apparently, even if you don't fully understand what you're sacrificing, you add a touch of green malachite to your upper lids, the copper-based pigment catching the growing light and making your eyes shimmer with otherworldly quality. The green isn't just decorative, it's also associated with fertility and rebirth, with the fresh growth that appears along the Nile after the floods recede. Every time you wear it, you're making a statement about vitality, about your connection to the cycles of nature that govern Egyptian life. Your lips and cheeks come next. You crush red ochre iron oxide mixed with fat and apply it sparingly. Egyptian aesthetic doesn't favour the heavily rouged look. Instead, you're aiming for a healthy flush, as if the gods have blessed you with perpetual youth and vigour. Some women add a touch of yellow ochre to their faces overall, creating a golden tone that harmonises with their sun-warmed skin. The mirror you use is polished copper or bronze, its surface buffed to a reflective shine that shows you a slightly hazy but recognisable version of yourself. Glass mirrors won't exist for centuries. But this metal disc serves well enough. You angle it to catch the morning light, examining your work, making small adjustments to ensure symmetry. Perfume comes next, and Egyptian perfumes are legendary even in your own time. You reach for a small ceramic jar containing a solidified perfume, a mixture of animal fat or vegetable oil infused with myrrh, frankincense, lotus flowers, or cinnamon. You warm a small amount between your fingers and apply it to your pulse points, wrists, throat, behind your ears. The scent unfolds slowly as your body heat releases it, creating an invisible aura around you that announces your presence before you enter a room. Some wealthy women wear perfume cones on their heads during parties, solid lumps of perfumed fat that slowly melt in the heat, releasing fragrance and creating rivulets of scented oil that run down their wigs and shoulders. You've seen this at festivals, and while it looks undeniably strange to describe, in practice it's oddly beautiful, like watching someone become slowly anointed by their own luxury. Your hands and feet require attention too. You examine your nails, keeping them clean and trimmed is another aspect of that Egyptian obsession with cleanliness. Some women stain their nails with henna, creating reddish-brown patterns that last for weeks. You've done this for special occasions, sitting with other women as the henna paste dried, turning your fingertips into temporary works of art. Your mother-in-law calls from the courtyard, reminding you that the sun is climbing and there's bread to be made. But you take one more moment for a practice that might surprise modern observers. You chew on a primitive toothbrush, a frayed stick, perhaps from the Salvadora persica tree, which releases natural cleaning compounds as you chew. You scrub your teeth with it, fighting against the grain dust that's ubiquitous in Egyptian bread and that grinds down everyone's teeth over time. Dental problems plague Egyptians of all classes, a consequence of flour contaminated with sand and stone fragments from the grinding process. You rinse your mouth with water mixed with natron, the same salt you used earlier for bathing. It leaves your mouth feeling clean, if slightly mineral tasting. Some women add aromatic herbs to sweeten their breath, chewing on parsley or mint leaves before social interactions. Standing now, fully groomed and decorated, you're ready to face the day. Your transformation has taken perhaps 30 minutes, far less than an elaborate modern routine, but significantly more than simply rolling out of bed. You've become a version of yourself that's public-ready, that honours cultural expectations, that demonstrates your self-respect and your respect for others. The kitchen area beckons, and with it comes the reality that will consume much of your morning, the endless, necessary work of feeding your household. You move toward the grinding stones set up in a shaded corner of the courtyard, where your mother-in-law is already assessing the grain situation. The large ceramic storage jars stand like silent guardians, containing the emmer wheat and barley that represent survival itself. Without these grains, there is no bread, no beer, and without bread and beer, there is essentially no Egyptian civilization. You kneel before the grinding stone, a saddle quern, archaeologists would call it, which consists of a large, flat-bottomed stone and a smaller stone you'll push back and forth across it. This isn't delicate work. Your mother-in-law has already measured out the grain for today's bread, pouring the golden kernels onto the stone surface. You begin the rhythmic motion, pushing the top stone forward, dragging it back, pushing forward again. The grain cracks and crushes beneath the pressure, slowly transforming into flour. The sound is hypnotic, a grinding, crunching rhythm that has echoed through Egyptian courtyards for thousands of years. Your shoulders and arms quickly begin to feel the strain. This is labour that builds muscle, that carves definition into your upper body in ways that would make modern fitness enthusiasts envious, though you'd gladly trade the workout for an easier method. Some wealthy households have servants who do nothing but grind grain all day, their lives reduced to this single, repetitive motion. You're grateful you have other tasks to break up the monotony, even if right now your arms are arguing otherwise. Here's something modern people rarely consider: the flour you're producing is contaminated with tiny particles of stone from the grinding process itself. Every time these stones scrape against each other, microscopic fragments break off and mix into the flour. You can't see them, can't taste them particularly, but they're there. And when you eat bread made from this flour, which you'll do every single day of your life, those stone particles will slowly grind down the enamel of your teeth. By middle age, most Egyptians have severely worn teeth, the grinding surfaces worn nearly flat, the roots sometimes exposed. It's the price of bread, the cost of civilization, and nobody knows how to avoid it. Your mother-in-law begins working a second grinding stone beside you, and for a while you work in companionable silence. The only sounds, the grinding of stone on grain and the increasingly active village beyond your walls. The sun is higher now, its heat beginning to assert itself. Though the courtyard's walls still provide some shade, historians still argue whether Egyptian women genuinely controlled their household kitchens, or whether men held ultimate authority over food preparation and distribution. But from your lived experience, do you know the truth? This is your domain. Your mother-in-law manages these resources with the skill of a general commanding troops. She knows exactly how much grain remains, how many loaves can be produced, what portion must be saved for beer making, and how to stretch supplies when the Nile's floods have been less generous than hoped. Once enough flour has been ground and your arms are trembling with fatigue, you move to the next stage, mixing and kneading. You pour the flour into a large pottery bowl, adding water gradually while mixing with your hands. The texture needs to be just right, too dry and the bread will be dense and crumbly. Too wet and it won't hold its shape. This is knowledge passed from mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter, a chain of wisdom stretching back through generations. Some days you add dates to the dough for sweetness, or herbs for flavour, but today you're making simple bread, the everyday sustenance that will accompany every meal. You knead the dough, pushing it with the heels of your hands, folding it over, pushing again. The repetitive motion is soothing in its way, meditative. Though your arms are still recovering from the grinding, while the dough rests, you turn your attention to yesterday's beer. Yes, Beer for breakfast, but this isn't the intoxicating beverage modern people imagine. Egyptian beer is thick, nutritious, slightly sweet, and relatively low in alcohol. It's more like liquid bread than anything else. And it serves as a crucial source of calories and nutrients. Children drink it, workers drink it, nobles drink it, everyone drinks it because the Nile water, while generally safe, isn't always reliable. And the fermentation process in beer making kills harmful organisms. You check the ceramic vat where yesterday's mixture has been fermenting, partially baked bread dissolved in water with dates for sweetness. Left to ferment naturally with wild yeasts, you stir it, tasting a small sip to assess its readiness. The flavour is malty, slightly sour, pleasantly yeasty. It's ready. You strain it through a basket woven from reeds, removing the larger chunks of bread, and pour the resulting liquid into smaller jars for the day's consumption. The bread dough has risen slightly, not much, as Egyptian bread uses natural fermentation rather than cultivated yeast, and you begin shaping it into flat round loaves. The oven in the courtyard has been heating since before dawn, fueled with dried dung and straw, materials that burn hot and steady. The interior is now a furnace, its clay walls radiating heat. You slide the loaves onto the oven's hot floor using a long wooden paddle, working quickly to avoid burning yourself. The heat is intense, making your face flush and sweat bead on your forehead despite the early hour. The smell of baking bread begins to fill the courtyard almost immediately, that universal, comforting aroma that signals home and safety across every culture and era. While the bread bakes, you prepare the morning meal's other components. There might be onions. Egyptians love onions with a passion that borders on worship, or lettuce. Cucumbers, or lentils if you have them. Protein might come from fish if someone went to market yesterday, or perhaps dried fish if fresh wasn't available. Wealthier households eat meat more regularly. But for most Egyptians, meat is reserved for festivals and special occasions. Your husband and children begin emerging from their sleeping areas, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and the knowledge that breakfast is approaching. The hierarchy of serving is clear. Your husband eats first, receiving the best portions, then the children, then you and your mother-in-law, then any servants if your household employs them. This isn't cruelty or oppression as modern sensibilities might interpret it. It's simply order, the structure that keeps households functioning. After the breakfast tasks are completed and the courtyard has been swept clean of crumbs and ash, you turn to work that defines much of an Egyptian woman's economic value: textile production. You move to the shaded area where your loom stands, a simple horizontal ground loom, its wooden frame staked into the earth, threads stretched taut between the beams. This loom is your wealth generator, your insurance policy, your contribution to the household economy that gives you leverage and voice in family decisions. You settle onto the ground before it, legs stretched out, your body positioned so you can lean forward to work the threads. The warp threads, the vertical ones, are already in place, having been set up during yesterday's session. Today you'll continue adding the weft threads, the horizontal ones that weave over and under, gradually building the fabric that will become a sheet, a garment, or a piece of trade goods. The thread itself represents hours of earlier labour. Flax cultivation along the Nile produces fibres that must be harvested at just the right moment too early, and they're weak. Too late and they're coarse. After harvesting comes retting, a process where the flax stalks are soaked in water until the woody parts separate from the usable fibres. Then comes the beating and combing, the spinning of those fibres into thread using a simple drop spindle, a weighted stick that twists as it falls, drawing out and twisting the fibres into continuous yarn. You've done all these steps yourself at various points, though in your household the thread spinning is often delegated to your youngest daughter, whose nimble fingers can produce remarkably fine, even thread. The thread she made last week is what you're working with now, wound onto small balls that rest in a basket beside you. The weaving motion is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. You pass the shuttle, a smooth stick with thread wound around it through the shed, the space between alternating warp threads. Then you use a wooden beater to push the new weft thread tightly against the previous rows, creating dense, durable fabric. Pass the shuttle, beat the thread, change the shed by lifting different warp threads. Pass the shuttle again. Your hands move with practiced efficiency, barely needing to think about the motions anymore. Historians still argue whether weaving was exclusively women's work in ancient Egypt, or whether men participated in textile production too. But from your observation, the division is fairly clear. Women dominate household textile production, while some men work in larger temple workshops producing luxury goods. The work itself is gendered, embedded with social meaning that extends beyond mere fabric creation. As you weave, your mind wanders to calculations. This piece of linen, when completed, will measure approximately 3 cubits by 4, large enough to serve as a sheet or to be sewn into several garments. If you choose to trade it at market, you know its value. Fine linen can be exchanged for grain, oil, vegetables, or even saved toward larger purchases like jewellery or better furniture. Your mother-in-law once traded a particularly fine piece of linen for a beautiful glazed ceramic bowl that still holds place of pride in your home. The fineness of the weave determines the fabric's value, and you're aiming for something middle grade, not the coarse utilitarian linen used for workers' clothes or sacks, but not the impossibly fine royal linen either, the kind that's nearly transparent and requires threads so fine that only the most skilled spinners can produce them. That royal linen, the stuff that makes wealthy women look like they're wrapped in woven air, takes exponentially longer to produce and commands prices far beyond your current economic reach. Your daughter joins you, settling before a second smaller loom set up nearby. She's learning, her hands still clumsy compared to yours, her fabric showing uneven tension and occasional gaps, but she's improving. This is how the knowledge transfers, mother to daughter, sitting side by side in the shade while your hands keep moving and conversation flows naturally. "Tell me again about the flax goddess," she asks. And you smile because you asked your mother the same question at her age. "Tate," you remind her. "Who taught us to weave, who gave us the gift of transforming plants into cloth." Some people say Tate is just another name for Hathor, the great goddess who rules over so many aspects of women's lives, but you've always imagined her as separate, a divine patron specifically devoted to your craft. The conversation meanders to gossip who in the village is producing the finest linen this season, which family might need to purchase fabric because their own production has fallen behind, who receive commissions from the temple for specific pieces. Textile work is surprisingly social, despite the repetitive nature of the task itself. Women often gather to weave together, their looms set up in adjacent courtyards or shared spaces, their voices creating a constant backdrop of community as their hands create fabric. Here's a quirky detail that makes archaeologists grin. Some Egyptian textiles have been found with woven-in signatures, slight intentional variations in the weave pattern that identified the maker. Your mother-in-law has such a signature, a subtle pattern she includes in one corner of every piece she makes. She's been teaching you to develop your own, a way of marking your work that will allow it to be traced back to you even years from now, even if it travels far from your village. It's a claim of authorship in a world that rarely records individual women's names. The sun climbs higher, and the heat becomes more oppressive. You can feel sweat forming beneath your linen dress, trickling down your spine. The shade helps, but weaving is active work despite its sedentary appearance. Your arms and shoulders engage constantly. Your core muscles activate to maintain your position. Your fingers press and pull and manipulate threads with surprising force. You pause to drink water, then beer, letting your hands rest for a moment. Repetitive strain injuries are common among weavers' aching wrists, sore fingers, shoulders that protest after hours in the same position. There's no relief for these ailments except rest, warm compresses, and perhaps a visit to a healer if the pain becomes debilitating. Looking at your work, you assess the progress. You've added perhaps 3 fingers width of new fabric this morning, not bad, considering the interruptions of breakfast preparation and your daughter's questions. At this rate, the piece will be complete in another week. Maybe less if you can dedicate more uninterrupted hours to it. The loom before you represents something profound, though you rarely articulate it even to your self-independence. The fabric you create has real economic value. It can be traded, sold, gifted. It gives you bargaining power within your household, ensures you're not entirely dependent on your husband's earnings or goodwill. If you were ever widowed or divorced, both possibilities in Egyptian society, your weaving skills would provide a path to supporting yourself and your children. The sun has reached its mid-morning position, and you know it's time to venture beyond your courtyard walls. Market day calls, and with it comes the opportunity to transform your household surplus into needed goods, to gather information about village affairs, and to participate in the vibrant economic life that pulses through Egyptian streets. You gather a sturdy woven basket, checking its contents several small jars of surplus grain, some dried fish your husband brought home in abundance last week, and a small pot of the fragrant oil your mother-in-law prepared from moringa seeds. Your daughter accompanies you, balancing a smaller basket on her head with the practiced ease of someone who has been doing this since she could walk. Egyptian women carry things on their heads with remarkable grace. It distributes weight efficiently and keeps hands free for other purposes. You've never given it much thought. It's simply how things are carried, as natural as breathing. The walk to the market takes you through narrow streets that wind between mudbrick houses. The village is fully awake now, alive with activity. Children dart between buildings, playing games you once played yourself, throwing sticks, rolling hoops, playing with balls made from papyrus or leather. Dogs doze in patches of shade, occasionally lifting their heads to assess passers-by before returning to their naps. The air carries the mingled scents of bread baking, donkeys, and the ever-present smell of the Nile itself, that rich, silty aroma that defines the Egyptian landscape. You exchange greetings with women sweeping their doorsteps, with men heading toward the fields, with elderly neighbours sitting in the shade. Everyone knows everyone in a village like yours. Anonymity doesn't exist when your community numbers in the hundreds rather than thousands. This interconnection provides security, support, and the comforting weight of social expectations that regulate behaviour more effectively than any law code. The market emerges into view not a permanent structure, but rather an open area where vendors spread their goods on mats or arrange them on simple wooden tables. The cacophony of voices hits you immediately, sellers calling out their wares, buyers haggling over prices, children begging their mothers for treats, friends shouting greetings across the crowd. This is commerce as social event, as theatre, as the heartbeat of community life. You make your way to the grain sellers first, eyeing the quality of their barley and emmer wheat. One vendor's grain looks cleaner than usual, with fewer chaff fragments and less evidence of weevil damage. You pick up a handful, letting it run through your fingers, assessing its weight and wholeness. The vendor, a weathered woman who's been selling grain for longer than you've been alive, watches you with knowing eyes. Fresh from the temple stores, she announces, blessed by the priests themselves. You suppress a smile at this claim. Everything is blessed by priests if it helps make a sale, but the quality speaks for itself. You begin the negotiation dance that defines every transaction in Egyptian markets. The grain is acceptable, you concede, though I've seen better this season. What do you ask for 2 measures? The vendor names a price slightly higher than you expected, calculated to leave room for haggling. This is the game, the expected ritual. Historians still argue whether Egyptian markets had fixed prices or whether everything was subject to negotiation. But your experience suggests that while some standardization existed for basic commodities, flexibility and personal relationship heavily influenced final exchanges. You counter with an offer that's slightly lower than you're actually willing to pay, and the negotiation continues. Eventually, you settle on a price that satisfies both parties. You'll trade one of your jars of oil and a small measure of your own grain for 2 larger measures of her superior barley. The exchange is made, both of you examining the goods carefully to ensure fair measure. There are standard measuring containers used throughout Egypt, but short measuring is common enough that vigilance is warranted. As you conduct this transaction, you're exercising economic rights that would astonish women in many other ancient civilizations. Egyptian women can own property, conduct business, enter into contracts, all without requiring a male guardian's permission. You're not your husband's property in any legal sense. You're an independent economic agent who happens to be married. This freedom has limits, certainly, but compared to Greek women who will live centuries from now, confined to their homes and forbidden from most public economic activity, you're remarkably autonomous. Your daughter has wandered to a vendor selling small amulets and trinkets, faience beads, tiny clay figurines, copper rings. You join her, examining the wares with appreciation for their craftsmanship, if not immediate plans to purchase. The vendor, a young man probably not much older than your daughter, launches into his practiced pitch. Protection against the evil eye, he claims, holding up a blue faience eye of Horus amulet. Blessed by the priests of Horus himself. Again with the priests. You wonder if they know how often their alleged blessings are invoked in the marketplace. But the amulet is pretty, the deep blue glaze catching the sunlight, and your daughter's eyes have lit up with desire. You remember being her age, wanting beautiful things with an intensity that felt like actual hunger. You examine the amulet more closely, checking for cracks or imperfections in the glaze, then begin negotiating. Here's where Egyptian commerce gets interesting. There's no money as modern people understand it. No coins, no currency, just relative values of goods and services calculated in standardized units, ibn for large transactions, kite for smaller ones that represent weights of copper or silver but don't physically exist as objects you can hold. Every transaction is essentially barter, with complicated equivalences negotiated on the spot. The amulet is worth, the vendor claims, 1/20th of a debn. You translate this quickly in your head. That's roughly equivalent to a large jar of grain or a small jar of good quality oil. You offer half that, suggesting the amulet is worth 1/40th of a debn at most. The negotiation proceeds until you settle on a price and you hand over some of your dried fish. An exchange that required both of you to perform mental calculations about relative values that would challenge people accustomed to simple price tags. With your market transactions completed and your baskets now filled with the day's acquisitions, you return home as the sun climbs toward its zenith. The heat is becoming substantial, that thick, pressing warmth that makes movement feel effortful inside your courtyard. Life continues its rhythm. Your youngest child, barely 3 years old, toddles toward you, arms outstretched, face breaking into a smile that melts away any market fatigue. You scoop him up, feeling his solid weight against your hip, a position so familiar that your body automatically adjusts to accommodate him. Children are everywhere in Egypt, their presence a constant backdrop to daily life. Your household currently contains 3 this toddler boy, your weaving daughter who's approaching her teenage years, and a middle son who's already spending most of his days learning his father's trade. But you've borne 5 children total. 2 didn't survive their first year, claimed by fevers and illnesses that remain mysteries despite the healer's best efforts. This loss is so common that it shapes the Egyptian worldview. Childhood is simultaneously precious and precarious, celebrated and guarded against constant threats. You settle in the courtyard's shade with your youngest, watching as he plays with simple toys, a carved wooden animal. Perhaps a hippopotamus, and a ball made from leather scraps stuffed with papyrus. His play is serious business to him, full of intense concentration as he makes the hippo walk across the packed earth floor. You find yourself studying his face, looking for signs of illness with the vigilance that never quite leaves Egyptian mothers. A persistent cough, unusual lethargy, a fever. These are harbingers that can transform a healthy child into a memory within days. Your middle son appears briefly, grabbing bread and onions before rushing back out to join his father at whatever task occupies them today. He's at that transitional age, no longer small child, but not yet a man, his body stretching and changing in ways that seem to happen overnight. Soon he'll marry, bringing a new daughter-in-law into your household, and the cycle will continue. You'll become the mother-in-law, hopefully more patient than your own has been, though you suspect every generation makes that promise to themselves. Your daughter, the weaver in training, has settled into a corner with a small grinding stone and some red ochre. She's making face paint, experimenting with different ratios of pigment to oil, creating variations in colour intensity. This is learning too, though not the formal education that wealthy children might receive. There are no schools for girls in your village, no scribal training that would teach her to read and write hieroglyphs. That knowledge remains largely the province of boys destined for administrative or priestly roles. Yet she's far from uneducated. She can calculate quantities for recipes and textile measurements, understands the agricultural calendar, knows the prayers and rituals appropriate to various occasions, can identify medicinal plants, and is learning the complex skills required for textile production. Her education is practical, experiential, passed through demonstration and participation rather than formal instruction. Historians still argue whether ordinary Egyptian women were literate, or if literacy was exclusively male and elite, but occasional evidence suggests some women could read and write, at least to a functional level. You yourself can recognize certain important symbols, marks indicating measurements. Some gods' names, basic record-keeping notations, though you couldn't compose a letter or read a literary text. It's enough for your purposes, for managing a household and participating in economic transactions. Your toddler has grown bored with his toys and begins demanding attention with increasingly insistent calls of "Mama, Mama." You shift him to your lap, beginning a clapping game that Egyptian children have played for generations. Your hands clap together, then against his small palms, while you chant a rhythmic verse about the Nile flooding, about boats sailing, about fish jumping. He dissolves into giggles, demanding again with the tyrannical insistence that only toddlers can muster. This moment, this simple, repetitive game connects you to something ancient and eternal. Your mother played this with you, and her mother before her, and countless mothers stretching back through time. The specific words might vary, but the rhythm, the hand clapping, the child's delighted laughter, these are constants that transcend individual lives. Feeding children consumes much of your daily energy. Your toddler still nurses occasionally, though you're trying to wean him now that he is past 3 years old. Egyptian mothers typically breastfeed for 3 years or so, a practice that provides nutrition, comfort, and natural child spacing, though not always reliable spacing, as your own childbearing history demonstrates. Some women use amulets or recite spells intended to prevent pregnancy, recipes involving acacia, dates, and honey that may have some contraceptive effect, though nobody fully understands the mechanisms. Your daughter brings her ochre experiments over for your approval. She's created 3 different shades, a bright orangey red, a deeper burgundy, and something in between. You compliment her work, suggesting she try adding a touch of animal fat to the deepest shade to improve its texture. She nods seriously, absorbing this wisdom, and returns to her corner to continue experimenting. Discipline, when necessary, is your domain. Your husband involves himself with the boys' behaviour, especially as they age. but the day-to-day management of children's conduct falls to you. Egyptian culture values children highly, their blessings from the gods, promises of continuity, insurance against a lonely old age, but they are also expected to learn respect, obedience, and the countless skills required for adult life. You use a combination of verbal correction, occasional physical discipline, a switch applied to legs being common, and the threat of social shame to shape behaviour. The heat has reached its peak, that midday intensity when even the animals seek shade and stillness. Your toddler's energy finally flags, his head growing heavy against your shoulder. You carry him to the sleeping room, laying him on a mat for his afternoon nap. His eyes fight to stay open briefly before surrender, his breathing deepening into the profound sleep of childhood. With your toddler sleeping and the household momentarily quiet, you turn your attention to the small shrine in the courtyard wall. The niche holds Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess, but also a clay figure of Bees, that dwarf deity with his fierce expression and protruding tongue. Guardian of households and children, before these simple representations of divine protection, you kneel, taking a moment to center yourself before beginning your midday prayers. Religion in Egypt isn't something separate from daily life. It's woven through every action, every decision, every hope and fear. The great temples with their towering columns and elaborate rituals exist in a different realm from your experience. You've seen them during festivals, stood in their vast courtyards while priests performed ceremonies in inner sanctums you'll never enter. But those grand religious expressions feel distant from the intimate divinity practiced here in your home. You light a small oil lamp, its flame flickering in the still air. The smell of palm oil mingles with the lingering scent of morning bread. You place fresh offerings before the deities, a piece of bread, a small cup of beer, a few dates. These aren't valuable offerings by temple standards, but they're given with genuine devotion, with the understanding that gods appreciate intention as much as material wealth. Your prayer is simple, spoken softly so as not to wake your sleeping child. You thank Taweret for protecting your family through another night. Ask Bees to continue guarding against snakes, scorpions, and malevolent spirits. You mention your children by name, requesting health and safety for each. You add a petition for your husband's continued prosperity, for successful crops, for harmony in your household. These aren't lofty theological concerns. They're the practical necessities that occupy your mind from dawn to dark. Some women have dreams that they interpret as divine messages, visions where gods offer guidance or warnings. You've experienced this yourself, a dream where Hathor appeared as a cow with stars on her belly, which you took as a favourable sign regarding your daughter's upcoming marriage negotiations. Whether the gods truly communicate through dreams, or whether dreams simply reflect your own anxieties and hopes, processed through symbolic imagery, you can't say for certain, but you pay attention to them, discuss them with other women. Sometimes consult the local priest if a dream seems particularly significant or troubling. Historians still argue whether ordinary Egyptians had personal relationships with major deities, or primarily focused on household gods and local manifestations of larger divine forces. But your experience suggests both operate simultaneously. You honour the great gods Ra, Osiris, Isis, Hathor, while maintaining closest connection with Taweret and Bees, who feel more accessible. More concerned with your immediate daily struggles, after your prayers, you perform a small ritual of purification, washing your hands and face again with water that's been left in the sun. Cleanliness maintains a quasi-religious significance in Egyptian life. It's simultaneously practical hygiene and spiritual practice, a way of maintaining ma'at, that fundamental concept of order, balance, and rightness that underpins Egyptian worldview. Your mother-in-law joins you at the shrine, adding her own prayers to yours. Despite the tensions that sometimes arise between you inevitable, when two adult women share household management, you find common ground in these religious observances. She teaches you prayers her mother taught her, corrects your pronunciation of divine names, shares interpretations of dreams and omens that her longer life has made her more skilled at reading. She tells you about a woman in the village who's been visiting the local healer with complaints of persistent headaches and disturbing dreams. The healer diagnosed it as spiritual attack someone. Perhaps a jealous neighbour had hired a magician to send harmful magic her way. The cure involved both medicinal treatments and magical countermeasures, amulets to wear, spells to recite, offerings to make at specific gods' shrines. You listen with interest and mild skepticism. Magic is real in your worldview. But you also know that people sometimes attribute to supernatural causes what might have natural explanations. Yet you wouldn't dismiss magic entirely. You yourself wear a small amulet tucked into your dress, a piece of inscribed faience that a priest sold your husband years ago, promising it would protect against miscarriage. Whether it works. Who can say you've lost 2 children but successfully carried 3 to term? Is that the amulet's protection or simply chance? The question feels unanswerable, so you continue wearing it, just in case. Here's a quirky detail that makes archaeologists raise eyebrows. Some Egyptian women kept small collections of what scholars call execration texts, broken pottery shards with curses or enemies' names written on them, which were ritually destroyed to magically harm those people. You don't engage in such practices yourself, finding them vaguely uncomfortable. But you know, women who do. One of your neighbours maintains she successfully cursed the woman who tried to seduce her husband. And indeed, that woman did suffer a series of misfortunes shortly after. Coincidence? Divine justice. The curse's effectiveness. The ambiguity allows everyone to believe what suits them. Your daughter emerges from the house carrying a small clay lamp shaped like a frog, a representation of Hecate, goddess associated with fertility and childbirth. She's been keeping oil burning in this lamp since last month, when her monthly bleeding began, marking her transition toward womanhood. This private shrine keeping is something she initiated herself after talking with older girls, a practice that emerges from feminine culture rather than priestly instruction. The afternoon heat seems to press down from above, and you decide to rest for a few moments yourself. You settle against the courtyard wall in a patch of shade, closing your eyes but remaining alert to household sounds your toddler might wake. Your daughter might need guidance. Your mother-in-law might require assistance with some task. This rest isn't really rest in the modern sense. It's simply a momentary pause in constant activity. The afternoon heat begins to relent ever so slightly, and this signals the time when women emerge from their homes to visit one another, to share news and gossip, to maintain the social networks that function as Egypt's informal communication system. Your mother-in-law has already left to visit her sister who lives 3 houses down, and you decide to take your daughter to visit your friend Neferet, whose home sits at the edge of the village near the path leading to the fields. You gather a small gift, some of the dates you purchased at market, because arriving empty-handed feels improper, even for casual visits. Your daughter carries a basket containing her latest weaving project, hoping to show it off and perhaps receive advice from Neferet, who's known for producing exceptionally fine linen. These afternoon visits serve multiple purposes. They're social interaction, certainly, but they're also educational exchanges, business networking, and intelligence gathering, all rolled into comfortable feminine companionship. The walk takes you past several neighbours, each requiring brief exchanges of greetings and pleasantries. You inquire about an elderly woman's arthritis, compliment another woman's new pottery jar visible through her open doorway, accept congratulations on your husband's recent successful trading expedition. These micro-interactions weave the social fabric that holds village life together, everyone tracking everyone else's fortunes, sorrows, celebrations, and scandals with keen interest. Neferet's courtyard is larger than yours, evidence of her husband's success as a craftsman who produces furniture for wealthy clients. She welcomes you warmly, immediately offering beer and bread. the standard hospitality that refusing would insult. You settle on woven mats in her courtyard's shade, and almost immediately the conversation flows in that particular way women's talk does, jumping from topic to topic, circling back, diving deep into certain subjects while skimming across others. She begins with news the carpenter's daughter is betrothed to a farmer's son from the next village. The negotiations were lengthy because the farmer's family wanted to ensure their son would inherit property despite having older brothers. Your daughter leans forward, fascinated by this intelligence that concerns people near her own age. Marriage negotiations occupy considerable space in feminine conversation. Who's marrying whom? What bride gifts were exchanged? Whether the match seems advantageous or questionable. Then Neferet lowers her voice conspiratorially, glancing around despite being in her own private courtyard. The priest's wife, she confides, is suspected of conducting an affair with a trader who passes through the village monthly. Several women have noticed the trader's visits to her home coincide with times when her husband is occupied at the temple. The evidence is circumstantial, lingering glances at market, the trader's gifts of fine fabric, the wife's defensive responses when questioned, but in a village where everyone monitors everyone else. Circumstantial evidence often carries the weight of proof. You absorb this information with appropriate reactions, raised eyebrows, knowing looks, murmured commentary. This isn't mere gossip for entertainment's sake, though it certainly entertains. It's also moral regulation, community standard enforcement conducted through feminine networks. The priest's wife, if guilty, is violating fundamental social contracts, and this talk serves as both judgment and warning. Other women, knowing this affair is now public knowledge, will think twice before engaging in similar behaviour. Historians still argue whether Egyptian women had sexual freedom or face strict fidelity expectations, and the truth seems complex and situational. Officially, adultery is condemned, particularly for women, with punishments ranging from social shaming to physical violence depending on circumstances and social class. But practically, enforcement varies wildly. A discreet affair might be ignored if it doesn't threaten household stability or produce questions about children's paternity. A public affair, however, threatens the social order and invites intervention. The conversation shifts to lighter topics. Neferet asks about your weaving projects, and your daughter seizes the opportunity to display her work. Neferet examines it critically but kindly, pointing out where the tension is uneven, demonstrating on her own loom how to achieve more consistent results. This is education happening organically, skills transmitted through observation and correction rather than formal instruction. Another woman joins Umatemwia, whose husband works as a scribe in the district administrative centre. She brings different news, more connected to broader political and economic developments. Tax assessments are coming soon, she reports, with collectors expected to arrive within the month to measure fields and count livestock. This information sets off calculations in everyone's minds how much grain must be set aside, whether livestock should be temporarily relocated to relatives in other villages, what strategies might minimise tax burden without inviting punishment. Mutamia also shares news from beyond the village. She's heard that the vizier inspected temples in the provincial capital last month, that Memphis continues building new monuments, that there are rumours of military campaigns being planned for the south. This news feels distant from your daily concerns but situates your life within a larger Egyptian world, reminding you that beyond your village exists a vast kingdom with pharaohs, armies, monumental architecture, and political machinations. The conversation meanders toward children, that universal topic that unites women across cultures and millennia. Neferet complains about her teenage son's rebelliousness, his increasing disrespect toward her authority, now that he's working alongside his father and feeling himself nearly a man. You commiserate, sharing your own concerns about your middle son's future. Whether the trade his father is teaching him will provide adequate livelihood. Here's something that would surprise modern observers. The conversation is remarkably frank about bodily functions, pregnancy, and sexuality. Egyptian women discuss menstruation, childbirth, and sexual relations with casual directness that would scandalize more prudish cultures. Mutemwia mentions she's using a contraceptive recipe involving crocodile dung mixed with honey. Whether this actually works is debatable, but she swears it prevented pregnancy for 6 months before she decided to try for another child. As the afternoon conversation winds down and the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, talk turns toward entertainment and artistic pursuits. Neferet mentions that a travelling group of musicians and dancers will perform at the upcoming festival honouring Hathor, and this sparks excited discussion. You feel a familiar anticipation building. These performances aren't just entertainment, they're participatory events where women display skills that carry both cultural and spiritual significance. You yourself play the sistrum, that distinctive Egyptian rattle instrument sacred to Hathor. It's a simple instrument in construction, a metal frame mounted on the handle, with loose metal rods that create a shimmering, rhythmic sound when shaken. But in practice, playing it well requires precise wrist control and an internalized sense of rhythm that takes years to develop. Your mother gave you her sistrum when you married, and you've been practicing ever since, participating in temple ceremonies and household celebrations whenever the opportunity arises. Your daughter has been learning to play a small hand drum, its ceramic body covered with stretched leather that produces sharp, clear tones when struck. You watch her now as Neferet brings out her own instruments, a sistrum and a larger drum, and suggests an impromptu practice session. This is how musical knowledge transfers in Egypt, through informal sessions where experienced players demonstrate and novices imitate, where mistakes are corrected gently and success is celebrated immediately. The courtyard fills with sound as you begin playing together. The sistrum's metallic shimmer combines with the drum's rhythmic pulse, creating layers that speak to something ancient in your blood. Rhythm in Egypt isn't merely musical, it's connected to the universe's fundamental patterns, to the Nile's rising and falling, to the sun's daily journey across the sky, to heartbeats and footsteps and the countless repetitive motions that structure human existence. Mutemwia begins to sing, her voice strong and clear, carrying a traditional song praising Hathor's beauty and benevolence. The lyrics speak of golden skin, of eyes like stars, of the goddess's power to bring joy and intoxication. Egyptian songs often blur the line between religious devotion and sensual appreciation. The same language used to praise goddesses appears in love poetry. In songs exchanged between men and women during courtship or celebration, your daughter tentatively joins the singing, her young voice weaving around Mutemwia's, occasionally losing the melody and finding it again. No one criticizes her mistakes. This is practice, exploration, the process by which competence gradually emerges from confusion. You continue shaking your sistrum, maintaining the steady rhythm that anchors everyone else's contributions. Dancing enters naturally, as it always does when music plays. Neferet rises from her mat, her body beginning to move in ways that would seem shocking to many future cultures, but feel perfectly natural here. Egyptian dance involves hip movements, undulating torso motions, arm gestures that tell stories or invoke divine presence. It's simultaneously celebratory and sacred, entertaining and ritualistic, individual expression and cultural tradition. Historians still argue whether Egyptian dance was primarily religious or secular in nature, but from your lived experience, the distinction feels artificial. When you dance at festivals, are you entertaining the crowd or honouring the gods when you dance at a wedding? Are you celebrating human love or invoking divine blessings on fertility? The answer is always both, simultaneously, without contradiction. Here's a quirky detail that makes archaeologists smile. Ancient Egyptian dance moves included something remarkably similar to what modern people call twerking, rapid, hip oscillations that emphasized feminine body parts in ways that served both aesthetic and possibly fertility magic purposes. You've performed these movements yourself during Hathor festivals, when the usual social restraints relax and women express themselves with a freedom that daily life rarely permits. Your daughter watches Neferet dance with wide-eyed fascination, trying to imitate the movements but finding her adolescent body still awkward. Not yet fully coordinated. Neferet notices and slows her movements, breaking them down into teachable components: how to isolate hip movement from upper body, how to maintain balance while the torso undulates, how to coordinate arm gestures with footwork. This is dance education happening in real time. Knowledge passed from accomplished practitioner to eager student. The music continues, building in intensity as confidence grows. Neighbours begin appearing at the courtyard's entrance, drawn by the sound, adding their voices or clapping rhythms that complement the instrumental music. What began as a small practice session transforms into an impromptu gathering, the kind of spontaneous celebration that punctuates village life with joy and communal connection. An elderly woman enters, bringing with her a wooden flute carved from a reed. She joins the ensemble, and suddenly the sound becomes richer, more complex. The flute's breathy tones add melodic lines that dance above the rhythm section, creating harmonies that seem to hang in the air like incense smoke. Egyptian music doesn't use the Western scales that will develop millennia from now. Its tonal structure is different, ancient, producing melodies that would sound exotic to future ears but feel like home to yours. Someone suggests singing the Song of the Harpers, that famous composition that celebrates life's pleasures and acknowledges death's inevitability. The lyrics are both cheerful and melancholic, encouraging listeners to enjoy wine, music, and love while they can, because death comes for everyone regardless of wealth or status. It's philosophy expressed through poetry, existential wisdom wrapped in entertaining verse. The singing grows louder, more enthusiastic, as women who know the lyrics join in while others simply hum along, contributing to the collective sound. Your voice blends with the others, individual identity dissolving into communal expression. This is the power of music in Egyptian life. It creates temporary unity, transforms individuals into ensemble, connects present performers with countless past generations who sang these same songs, shook these same instruments, moved their bodies in these same ancient patterns. As the impromptu musical gathering winds down and women begin drifting back to their own homes to prepare evening meals, conversation turns to a topic that women guard as closely as any treasure medical knowledge. Neferet mentions that her youngest child has been suffering from a persistent cough, and immediately the gathered women transform into a consulting circle of healers, each offering diagnoses and remedies drawn from generations of accumulated wisdom. You listen carefully, because this knowledge might save your own children's lives someday. Mudamia suggests a mixture of honey and ground dates, claiming it soothes irritated throats and has cured coughs in her household. Another woman recommends inhaling steam infused with crushed juniper berries, a treatment her grandmother swore by. Neferet nods, mentally cataloguing these suggestions, weighing them against her own observations of her child's symptoms. This exchange represents something profound that historians are only beginning to fully appreciate. Women in ancient Egypt functioned as primary healthcare providers for their families and communities. While professional physicians existed predominantly male, trained in temple schools or through apprenticeships, most medical care happened at the household level, administered by women using knowledge passed mother to daughter through countless generations. You yourself maintain a small collection of medicinal substances stored in ceramic jars in your home. There's ground willow bark for pain and fever. It contains what future scientists will call salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, though you simply know it works. There's myrrh for treating wounds and preventing infection, its antiseptic properties proven through millennia of use, even if the mechanisms remain mysterious. There's castor oil for digestive complaints, fenugreek for encouraging milk production in nursing mothers, and coriander seeds for various ailments including bad breath. Some of your remedies come from professional healers or priests who specialize in medical knowledge, purchased at market or received in trade, but many come from the collective feminine wisdom pool recipes tested across generations, refined through trial and error, shared freely among women who understand that everyone's children face similar threats and everyone benefits when healing knowledge circulates. Historians still argue whether Egyptian women practiced real medicine or merely folk remedies and superstition, but this distinction misses the point. Your remedies combine botanical substances with demonstrable physiological effects, practical treatments like wound cleaning and splinting, dietary interventions, and yes, magical incantations and amulets. From your perspective, all these approaches work together. Why would you exclude magical protection when treating an illness that might have supernatural as well as natural causes? The conversation shifts to more intimate health concerns. One woman quietly mentions she's experiencing irregular bleeding between her monthly cycles, and the group immediately offers theories and treatments. Could be related to diet, increase intake of dates and figs. Could be a spiritual imbalance, make offerings to Taweret and Hathor. Could be a physical problem with the womb, try a specific herbal tea that's supposed to regulate such things. Pregnancy and childbirth dominate much of women's medical conversation, hardly surprising given that these events carry significant mortality risk. Every woman knows someone's sister, friend, neighbour who died in childbirth or from complications shortly after. The fear is real and rational, tempered by faith in divine protection and practical knowledge about how to increase survival chances. You share a remedy your mother taught you for morning sickness, ginger root chewed slowly upon waking, before eating anything else. Several women confirm they've used this successfully, while one mentions she found it ineffective but discovered that smelling fresh mint helped control her nausea. This is how medical knowledge evolves through shared experimentation, through comparing what works for different bodies, through building a repository of options because no single treatment works universally. Here's something that would fascinate modern gynecologists. Egyptian women used a primitive pregnancy test involving urinating on wheat and barley seeds. If the seeds sprouted, pregnancy was indicated. If the wheat sprouted first, the baby would be male. And if barley sprouted first, female. This sounds like pure superstition, but modern research has actually confirmed that pregnant women's urine contains elevated hormones that can promote seed germination. The sex prediction aspect doesn't work, but the basic pregnancy detection showed remarkable empirical observation. Contraception is discussed with surprising openness. The crocodile dung and honey mixture mutemwia mentioned earlier is one approach, though its effectiveness is questionable. Other women describe using pessaries made from various substances, acacia gum being common inserted before intercourse to prevent conception. Acacia gum happens to be slightly spermicidal when it ferments, producing lactic acid, so this method has some actual efficacy beyond placebo effect. The conversation takes a somber turn when discussing infant mortality. One woman lost her baby just last month to a fever that came suddenly and couldn't be broken despite every remedy tried. The group's mood shifts to shared grief, to that understanding that bonds women who've experienced similar losses. Infant death is so common that every mother carries the fear of it, watches her children with vigilance that never fully relaxes, celebrates each year survived as a victory against forces that claim so many young lives. You mention your own two losses, children who never reached their first year. Saying their names aloud still brings a tightness to your throat, though years have passed. The other women murmur sympathies, share their own stories, create a space where grief can be acknowledged without overwhelming. This communal mourning serves a function. It reminds everyone that child loss isn't punishment or individual failure, but rather a common tragedy that strikes randomly, cruelly, without regard for how carefully you follow rituals or how fervently you pray. As the sun continues its descent and the shadows lengthen across Neferet's courtyard, the conversation naturally drifts toward a topic that sets Egyptian women apart from their counterparts in many other ancient civilizations: their legal rights and economic independence. Mutamwia mentions that she's finalizing the purchase of a small plot of land adjacent to her family's property, and this announcement sparks animated discussion about property ownership, inheritance, and the surprising freedoms Egyptian law affords to women. You listen with particular interest because you yourself own property, a small section of land that your father gave you as part of your inheritance, separate from what your brothers received. This land isn't merely symbolic. It generates actual income through grain production. Income that belongs to you alone, not to your husband. If you chose to sell it, the proceeds would be yours to keep or spend as you saw fit. If your marriage ended either through death or divorce, this property would remain yours, providing economic security independent of any man's support. This independence would astonish women in many other ancient societies. Greek women, living centuries from now, will be legal minors their entire lives, passing from father's control to husband's control without ever achieving independent legal status. Roman women will have slightly more freedom, but still operate under significant male guardianship. Egyptian women, by contrast, can own property, inherit from parents and spouses, buy and sell goods, enter into contracts, and even initiate divorce, all without requiring male permission or oversight. Neferet explains the details of her land purchase, how she negotiated directly with the seller, how the contract was drawn up by a scribe with both parties present, how she paid using grain and linen she'd accumulated through her own weaving work. The transaction was entirely hers. Her husband was aware of it and approved. But his approval wasn't legally required. She's expanding her own economic portfolio, building wealth that will belong to her and eventually pass to her children according to her wishes. Historians still argue whether this legal equality translated into actual social equality, or if informal patriarchal structures limited women's practical freedom. But your lived experience suggests genuine power exists within these legal frameworks. You've seen women inherit substantial estates, manage businesses, lend grain at interest, and make significant economic decisions that shape their families' fortunes. The law isn't merely theoretical, it provides real leverage, real options, real agency. The conversation turns to inheritance, that crucial mechanism by which wealth transfers across generations. In Egypt, both sons and daughters inherit from parents, though the exact divisions vary by family circumstances and negotiations. Your father divided his property among all his children, giving slightly larger portions to your brothers who would need to support families, but ensuring you and your sisters received substantial shares that provided economic security regardless of marital circumstances. This inheritance system means women enter marriage as economic partners rather than dependents. The marriage itself requires a formal contract that specifies what each party brings to the union and what happens if the marriage dissolves. You remember your own marriage contract, drawn up by a scribe, outlining your property, your husband's property, and the financial arrangements should either of you choose to divorce. Yes, divorce initiated by either party. If your husband wanted to divorce you, he'd need to return your property plus provide additional compensation for the disruption to your life. If you wanted to divorce him, you could simply declare the marriage ended, reclaim your property, and leave. There would be social consequences. Certainly divorce carried stigma and invited gossip, but legal barriers didn't exist to trap women in unbearable marriages the way they would in many future societies. One woman in the group shares that she actually divorced her first husband after 3 years of marriage. He was lazy, she explains, failing to provide adequately for the household despite being perfectly capable of work. She initiated divorce proceedings, reclaimed her property, and eventually remarried a man who proved more industrious. She speaks of this matter-of-factly, without shame or apology, though you detect hints that the experience was more difficult emotionally than she admits. Still, the point stands: she had options, exercised them, and rebuilt her life according to her own choices. Here's a quirky legal detail that makes modern lawyers raise their eyebrows. Some Egyptian marriage contracts included clauses about sexual exclusivity and domestic harmony. One famous contract specified that if the husband took a second wife without the first wife's permission, she could divorce him and keep all community property. Another contract required the husband to give his wife a certain amount of silver annually as personal spending money. No questions asked about how she used it. These weren't standard provisions, but rather negotiated terms that demonstrated women's ability to advocate for their interests during marriage formation. The discussion shifts to widowhood, another circumstance where Egyptian law protected women more robustly than many ancient legal systems. When a husband died, his widow inherited a significant portion of his estate, typically 1/3 if there were children, more if there weren't. She also retained all property she'd brought to the marriage and any she'd acquired independently during it. A widow could remarry if she chose, but she could also remain single, managing her property and household independently without requiring a male guardian. You know several widows in your village who've chosen not to remarry, preferring their independence to the complications of joining another household or bringing another man into theirs. They're respected community members, economically self-sufficient, participating fully in village life without social stigma attached to their unmarried status. This option to be a single adult woman who's neither pitied nor marginalized is another feature of Egyptian society that distinguishes it from many neighboring cultures. The afternoon has melted into early evening, and you realize with a start that you need to return home to prepare the evening meal. You gather your daughter, thank Neferet for her hospitality, and begin the walk back through streets now painted with the golden light of approaching sunset. The village has that particular energy of day's end workers returning from fields, children being called home, cooking fires being lit, the communal rhythm shifting from productivity to restoration. Your courtyard welcomes you back with familiar sights and smells. Your husband has returned, sitting in the shade and repairing a fishing net, his hands moving with the automatic efficiency of someone who's performed this task thousands of times. Your middle son helps him, learning through observation and occasional correction. Your toddler has awakened from his nap and toddles around the courtyard, his energy renewed, his demands for attention immediate and insistent. The evening meal requires preparation, and you move into this work with practiced rhythm. Your mother-in-law has already started a fire in the cooking area, coals glowing red beneath a ceramic pot. The menu tonight is simple but nourishing lentil stew flavoured with onions and garlic. Fresh bread from this morning's baking, a few cucumbers, and beer to drink. Wealthier households might include fish or even meat, but your family eats well enough by village standards, rarely experiencing genuine hunger except during years when the Nile's flood disappoints and crops suffer. You begin by checking the lentils that have been soaking since morning. They've softened appropriately, ready to be cooked. You drain them and add them to the pot where onions are already sizzling in oil, releasing that familiar, comforting aroma that signals home across cultures and centuries. Garlic goes in next, crushed with a mortar and pestle, its pungent smell sharp and appealing. Your daughter helps by slicing cucumbers and arranging them on a ceramic plate. These simple tasks are how she learns not through formal instruction but through participation, through doing the work alongside experienced women, through gradual assumption of more complex responsibilities as competence grows. By the time she marries, she'll be fully capable of managing her own household's food preparation, having absorbed thousands of hours of practical knowledge. The stew bubbles gently, requiring occasional stirring to prevent sticking. You add water as needed, adjusting consistency, tasting and adding a pinch of salt, precious salt that's been evaporated from seawater or mined from desert deposits, valuable enough to be used judiciously. Historians still argue whether ordinary Egyptians heavily salted their food or used it sparingly, but your experience suggests moderation. Salt enhances flavour, but must be conserved for preservation purposes and isn't wasted on over-seasoning. Your husband and son finish with the fishing net and wash their hands in the basin kept for this purpose. Cleanliness before meals is expected, another manifestation of Egypt's cultural emphasis on washing and purification. They settle in the courtyard, waiting for food to be served, engaging in quiet conversation about tomorrow's plans, where to fish, what markets might need visiting, whether certain equipment requires repair or replacement. You retrieve the bread from its storage basket, checking for any signs of mould or insect damage. The loaves are still fresh, their crusts firm, their interiors tender enough. Some get torn into pieces for dipping in the stew, others will be eaten plain with the cucumbers. The simplicity of the meal doesn't diminish its importance. This is the daily sustenance that keeps your family functioning, the fuel that powers all the labour and activity that fills Egyptian days. Your mother-in-law ladles stew into ceramic bowls, and you begin serving according to established hierarchy. Your husband receives his bowl first, along with the best pieces of bread. He eats with obvious appreciation, occasionally grunting approval at the stew's seasoning. Your son receives his portion next, eating with the voracious appetite of adolescence, already reaching for seconds before finishing firsts. Your daughter and toddler are served together, and you help your youngest manage his bowl, preventing spills and ensuring he actually eats rather than playing with his food. Finally, you and your mother-in-law serve yourselves, settling down to eat after everyone else has begun. This pattern of serving isn't oppression in your mind, it's order, the proper way of doing things, as natural as the sun rising in the east. The food tastes good, seasoned perfectly, the lentils tender without being mushy, the onions sweet and soft, the garlic providing pleasant sharpness. You eat slowly, savouring the flavours, feeling the day's hunger being satisfied. Around you, your family eats together, this daily ritual that bonds you as a unit that marks the transition from day's work to evening's rest. Conversation during the meal is relaxed, informal. Your husband mentions that the fishing has been good lately, that he might trade some of tomorrow's catch for tools he needs. Your mother-in-law reports on village news gathered during her afternoon visit to her sister. Your daughter shares excitement about the upcoming festival. Your son describes something funny that happened while working with his father. These mundane exchanges are the fabric of family life, unremarkable individually, but collectively creating the sense of belonging and connection that makes a house a home. Here's something that might surprise modern sensibilities. The meal doesn't include elaborate table manners or formal dining etiquette. You eat with your hands, tearing bread and using it to scoop stew, licking fingers between bites, reaching across one another to grab more food. It's communal, informal, focused on sustenance rather than performance. Fancier meals at festivals or when hosting important guests might involve more ceremony, but daily family dining is functional and relaxed. As the meal concludes, you gather the empty bowls and take them to be rinsed. Clay pottery doesn't clean easily, but you scrub the bowls with sand and water, removing most of the residue. They'll be left to dry overnight and used again tomorrow. Nothing is wasted in Egyptian households. Broken pottery gets ground up and reused in building materials. Food scraps go to animals or get composted. Every resource is maximised because survival depends on efficiency. The meal concluded and the courtyard tidied. You turn toward the rituals that will prepare you for sleep. The sun has fully set now. the sky deepening through shades of violet into darkness, and the first stars are appearing like pinpricks in the vast expanse above. Your husband lights oil lamps, small ceramic dishes filled with oil with a wick protruding from one end, placing them strategically to provide illumination without wasting precious fuel. The flickering light creates dancing shadows on the mudbrick walls, transforming familiar spaces into something slightly mysterious, slightly otherworldly. You return to your sleeping room with a basin of water, this time specifically for evening ablutions. The nighttime grooming routine differs from morning, less elaborate, more focused on cleansing away the day's accumulation of dust, sweat, and oil. You begin by washing your face, carefully removing the eye makeup you applied with such care this morning. The kohl comes off with oil and gentle rubbing, revealing your natural eyes beneath the decorated exterior. Your skin feels tight from sun exposure and the day's activities, so you apply more oil, this time a lighter oil, perhaps moringa or sweet almond, massaging it into your face and neck with circular motions. This nightly moisturizing isn't vanity, but necessary skincare in Egypt's harsh climate where the sun is relentless and the air holds little humidity. Without constant oil application, skin would crack and age prematurely, becoming leathery and uncomfortable. You run a comb through your hair again, working out tangles that accumulated during the day's activities. Some women rebraid their hair for sleeping, creating neat plaits that prevent tangling overnight. But tonight you simply smooth yours back and secure it loosely with a strip of linen. The goal is to keep hair off your face while sleeping without creating tension that might cause headaches or hair breakage. Your feet receive special attention. They've carried you through the day's tasks, and the packed earth floors and dusty streets have left them decidedly dirty. You wash them thoroughly, scrubbing between toes, checking for any cuts or thorns that might have embedded themselves during your travels. Foot care is important. An infected foot wound can incapacitate you for weeks, preventing the work that keeps your household functioning. You apply oil here too, working it into the tough skin of your heels and the tender skin between your toes. Historians still argue whether Egyptians bathed fully every day or if complete washing was reserved for special occasions. But your experience suggests that while full immersion bathing might be irregular, partial washing happens constantly. You wash face and hands multiple times daily, feet at least twice, and give yourself more thorough cleanings whenever practical. The cultural emphasis on cleanliness runs deep, connected to religious purity concepts as much as physical comfort. Your daughter joins you in these preparations, mirroring your actions as she's done since childhood. She washes her own face, removes her minimal makeup, applies oil with perhaps more enthusiasm than strictly necessary. The feel of smooth skin appeals to her emerging feminine consciousness. You watch her with mixed feelings, pride in her growing competence, nostalgia for her childhood that's slipping away, anxiety about her approaching womanhood and all the risks it carries. You help your toddler with his minimal nighttime routine, washing his face and hands despite his protests, checking his body for any scrapes or rashes that might need attention. He's drowsy already, his energy finally depleted, his resistance to bedtime weakening. You'll nurse him briefly before he sleeps. One of the remaining nursing sessions as you continue the weaning process. These moments feel precious, knowing they're numbered, that he's growing toward independence even as part of you wants to keep him small and close forever. Your mother-in-law has her own nighttime preparations happening in her section of the house. You can hear water splashing, her quiet movements as she performs her own cleansing rituals. Age has made her routines longer. More laborious joints that moved easily in youth now protest. Skin that once glowed now requires more careful maintenance, yet she persists, maintaining the standards she's upheld for decades, refusing to surrender to age's demands without resistance. Here's a detail that would fascinate dermatologists. Some Egyptian women apply a nighttime face mask made from ground almonds mixed with honey and milk. This treatment supposedly prevents wrinkles and maintains youthful skin. You've tried it occasionally, though the stickiness and the fear of attracting insects to your face while sleeping makes it less appealing than the simple oil application. Whether it actually works or is merely expensive placebo, you can't say, but wealthy women swear by it. You change into your sleeping garment a simple linen shift, lighter and looser than your day dress. Some people sleep naked, especially in summer's oppressive heat, but you prefer the minimal coverage. It feels proper, maintains modesty even in sleep, provides slight protection against nighttime insects that might bite exposed skin. The household slowly settles into nighttime mode. Your husband performs his own abbreviated grooming, washing face and hands, checking that doors are secured, ensuring the courtyard is clear of anything that might attract unwanted visitors, both human and animal. Your middle son is already asleep, the deep unconsciousness of adolescent exhaustion claiming him the moment he lay down. Your daughter climbs onto her sleeping mat, arranging her covering sheet with particular care, perhaps thinking about the festivals and gatherings that occupy her increasingly social life. You nurse your toddler, feeling his small body relax against yours as he drinks, his eyes growing heavy, his breathing deepening towards sleep. This connection skin against skin, your body nourishing his, feels primal and sacred. A bond that transcends individual identity and connects you to every mother who's ever lived. When he finally releases and falls fully asleep, you carefully transfer him to his mat, covering him lightly, watching his chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of healthy sleep. The household has settled into near silence now, with only the occasional sound of shifting bodies, quiet breaths, and the distant barking of village dogs breaking the stillness. You return to the sleeping room you share with your husband, where the wooden bed frame waits with its woven surface and the curved headrest that will support your neck through the night. Your husband is already there, settling onto his side of the bed, and you join him, lying down with the familiar sense of another day completed, another night arrived. The intimacy of marriage exists in this space, in these private hours when the household sleeps and you're simply two people sharing life's burdens and occasional pleasures. Egyptian attitudes towards sexuality are remarkably pragmatic compared to many cultures that will follow. Sex is acknowledged as a natural part of married life, discussed without excessive shame or elaborate euphemism. Love poetry from Egyptian literature speaks frankly about desire, about the physical attraction between partners, about longing and satisfaction. Your relationship with your husband contains affection, genuine fondness built over years of shared experience, of children raised together, of hardships weathered as a team. Whether this constitutes romantic love as modern people understand it, you're not entirely sure. Your marriage was arranged by families seeking advantageous alliances, negotiated with attention to property and social compatibility rather than personal feelings. Yet affection grew from proximity and partnership, from the thousand small kindnesses and considerations that accumulate over years. Historians still argue whether Egyptian marriages were primarily economic arrangements or if personal compatibility and affection played significant roles. But your experience suggests both elements coexist. The economic and social functions of marriage are undeniable. It's how property transfers, how households form, how social networks expand and strengthen. But within these practical frameworks, genuine emotional bonds develop, creating partnerships that transcend mere convenience. Tonight, you simply lie beside each other, talking quietly about tomorrow's plans and lingering concerns. Your husband mentions he's worried about your middle son's tendency toward laziness, questions whether the boy will develop the work ethic necessary for adult success. You defend your son while acknowledging the concern, suggesting that adolescence naturally includes rebellion against authority and that he'll likely mature into responsibility as he ages, the conversation drifts to your daughter's approaching marriage prospects. Several families have made indirect inquiries, testing whether your household might be interested in forming alliances. You discuss the merits of each potential match. This family has wealth, but a reputation for harshness. That family is kind, but struggles economically. Another family offers excellent social connections, but their son seems immature. These calculations are complex, balancing your daughter's happiness against practical considerations of her future security and your household's strategic interests. Egyptian women's voices carry significant weight in these marriage negotiations. While fathers often conduct the formal discussions, mothers provide crucial intelligence about potential families, about the character of proposed husbands, about household dynamics that might make a match advantageous or problematic. Your opinion about your daughter's marriage will influence the final decision substantially, perhaps even determine it entirely if you argue forcefully enough. Here's something that surprises many people about ancient Egypt. Married couples had sexual rights and expectations that applied to both partners. A wife could complain if her husband neglected his marital duties, and this complaint would be taken seriously by family and community. Similarly, husbands expected regular sexual access to their wives. Though consent and mutual satisfaction received more consideration than in many ancient cultures, the balance wasn't perfect equality. Men definitely held more power, but it wasn't the complete subordination that characterized many other ancient societies. Contraception, when desired, involves those methods you discussed earlier with the other women, various pessaries, timing calculations based on monthly cycles, and prayers to deities who might grant or withhold fertility according to divine will. Pregnancy happens frequently despite these efforts, because ancient contraception is hit or miss at best. You've borne 5 children, lost 2, and might bear more depending on your fertility's continuation and chance. The physical relationship between you and your husband has evolved over years of marriage. Initial awkwardness neither of you were experienced on your wedding night gave way to comfortable familiarity. You know his preferences, he knows yours, and while passion isn't the defining feature of your intimate life, mutual consideration and occasional genuine pleasure exist. Egyptian love poetry suggests that sexual satisfaction was valued and pursued, not merely endured as duty. Some marriages include secondary wives or concubines, particularly among wealthy men who can afford multiple households. Your marriage is monogamous. Partly from economic necessity, your husband couldn't support additional wives, and partly from preference. The emotional complexity of polygamous households seems exhausting. The rivalries and tensions among co-wives consuming energy you'd rather direct elsewhere. Tonight, intimacy isn't on the agenda. Both of you are tired from the day's labours, content to simply lie close, sharing warmth and companionship. Your husband's breathing gradually deepens towards sleep, his body relaxing into the bed's familiar contours. You remain awake a bit longer, your mind processing the day's events, planning tomorrow's tasks, worrying over your children as mothers always do, regardless of era or culture. The oil lamp flickers lower, its fuel nearly exhausted, casting ever weaker light across the room. You'll let it burn out naturally rather than extinguishing it. The remaining light provides comfort, pushes back the darkness just a bit longer. Egyptian nights carry dangers, both real and imagined scorpions that might crawl into sleeping areas, snakes seeking warmth, and the spirits that folklore insists wander after sunset. The lamp's small flame feels like protection, however minimal. You shift on the bed, adjusting the linen sheet covering you, finding a comfortable position on the rope surface. The wooden headrest supports your neck at an angle that takes getting used to, but supposedly prevents wrinkles and protects elaborate hairstyles, though your simple hair arrangement hardly requires such protection. Still, You've slept this way your entire life, and flat pillows would feel strange now, probably uncomfortable. Sleep begins to creep over you like the Nile's slow flood, gradual and inevitable. Your thoughts grow less linear, more dreamlike, drifting between memory and imagination, between conscious awareness and the mysterious realm where the gods are said to communicate with mortals. Egyptian culture places great significance on dreams. They're considered messages from the divine, warnings or promises that require interpretation and attention. You've experienced prophetic dreams yourself, or at least dreams that seemed prophetic in retrospect. Their symbolic imagery aligning eerily with subsequent events. Your breathing synchronizes with your husband's steady rhythm beside you. The household has fallen completely silent now, except for the small sounds that accompany sleep, someone shifting position, a child murmuring in dreams, the settling of mudbrick walls as they release the day's accumulated heat. Outside, the village rests under starlight. The Nile flows eternal and dark, and the desert stretches vast and silent beyond the cultivated lands that sustain your civilization. You think about the day that's ending, the endless cycle of tasks that will resume again at dawn, the grinding of grain, the weaving of thread, the preparation of food, the tending of children, the maintenance of household shrines, the participation in social networks that bind your community together. These daily actions seem small, even mundane, yet they constitute the actual substance of existence. History records pharaohs and pyramids, wars and dynasties, but real life happens here, in these quiet moments, in the accumulation of ordinary tasks performed by ordinary women whose names will never be carved in stone. Do you remember the women who gathered this afternoon, sharing music and medical knowledge, negotiating social hierarchies through gossip and support? Do you remember your daughter's face as she concentrated on her weaving, her growing competence visible in every careful motion? Do you remember your toddler's sleepy weight against your chest as he nursed toward unconsciousness? These moments are your legacy, passed forward through generations not as monuments but as lived experience, as knowledge transmitted through demonstration and participation. Historians still argue about what Egyptian women truly thought and felt, how they experienced their lives, whether they felt constrained or empowered by their society's structures. But you know your own truth life is complex, containing both limitation and freedom, both hardship and joy, both individual agency and social constraint. You exercise real power within defined boundaries. You make genuine choices among available options. You shape your world even as you're shaped by it. The oil lamp finally exhausts its fuel, the flame flickering one last time before dying, and darkness settles more completely over the room. Your eyes have adjusted enough that you can still make out basic shapes, the doorway opening to the courtyard, the storage baskets against the wall. Your husband's sleeping form beside you. The darkness doesn't frighten you particularly, though you respect its dangers. You've placed protective amulets around the sleeping areas, said your prayers to guardian deities, taken reasonable precautions against nighttime threats. Your mind drifts toward tomorrow, already planning the sequence of tasks that will fill the hours after sunrise. More grain to grind, that weaving project to continue, perhaps a visit to market if supplies run low. Definitely more attention needed for your daughter's marriage prospects. The endless work of maintaining a household, of keeping your family fed and clothed and functioning, of participating in the communal life that makes existence bearable and occasionally even joyful. But beneath these practical concerns, deeper questions occasionally surface. What is your purpose in the cosmic order the gods created humans to serve them, according to temple teachings, to maintain the rituals and offerings that sustain divine existence? Yet your service happens primarily in domestic spaces rather than grand temples. Perhaps the divine appreciates household shrines and morning prayers just as much as elaborate temple ceremonies. Perhaps your daily labour transforming grain into bread, flax into linen, Chaos into order mirrors the gods' own creative work on a smaller scale. Here's a thought that would fascinate philosophers. You're living through time that will eventually be called ancient, though to you it's simply now, simply the present moment. The pyramids that will mesmerize future civilizations are already old in your time, built by ancestors whose lives seem as distant to you as yours will seem to people millennia hence. You exist in a continuous stream of human experience, connected backward to countless previous generations and forward to countless future ones, all sharing the fundamental challenges of survival, connection, and meaning-making. Sleep pulls harder now, your body surrendering to exhaustion, your mind releasing its grip on conscious thought. Images begin flickering behind your closed eyelids, fragments of the day's events mixing with symbolic imagery drawn from your culture's vast repository of religious and mythological symbols. You see the goddess Hathor as a cow with stars on her belly, the same image from your previous significant dream. You see the Nile flooding, its waters life-giving and destructive simultaneously. You see your children grown and successful, a vision that might be prophecy or merely hope. The boundary between waking and sleeping grows permeable, and you drift across it without marking the exact moment of transition. Your consciousness disperses into dreams that will be partially forgotten by morning, leaving only fragments, impressions, perhaps a symbolic message that requires interpretation. Egyptian dream interpretation is a sophisticated practice. There are professional dream interpreters who can be consulted, scrolls listing common dream symbols and their meanings, a whole system for decoding the night's visions. But tonight your dreams are gentle, untroubling, the kind that provide rest rather than disturbance. You dream of weaving, your hands moving in familiar patterns, creating fabric that extends endlessly, beautiful and perfect. You dream of your children laughing, healthy and safe. You dream of the Nile at dawn, its surface reflecting golden light, birds calling from the papyrus reeds, everything peaceful and right with the world. Your breathing deepens into sleep's full embrace, your body completely relaxed, your mind quiet except for the dream images that drift through like clouds. Beside you, your husband sleeps soundly, his presence a comfort even in unconsciousness. In the adjacent rooms, your children sleep their own various sleeps, your toddler's profound slumber, your daughter's lighter sleep that might include her own prophetic dreams, your son's adolescent unconsciousness. The household rests, the village rests, the land of Egypt rests under starlight, and the watching eyes of gods who never sleep. The night progresses through its hours, moving steadily toward the dawn that will come inevitably, that always comes, bringing with it the sun god Ra's daily rebirth and the resumption of human activity. But for now, there's only darkness and stillness and the deep rest that allows life to continue, that restores bodies and spirits for tomorrow's labours. You sink deeper into sleep's embrace, your identity dissolving temporarily into something more universal. You're not just yourself anymore, but every Egyptian woman who's ever lived, every woman who's ground grain and nursed children and negotiated social hierarchies and found meaning in seemingly small actions. Your individual life connects to something larger, something that transcends your particular existence and touches the eternal patterns that repeat across generations. The night holds you gently, like a mother holding a child, and you rest in its protection. Tomorrow will bring its challenges and joys, its endless tasks and occasional surprises, but tonight there's only this peace, darkness, dreams, and the slow breathing of sleep. Your body repairs itself. Your mind processes the day's experiences. Your spirit rests in the knowledge that you've fulfilled your duties, honoured your gods, cared for your family, and maintained your small portion of Mat, that cosmic order and balance that Egyptians value above all else. And so you sleep, as Egyptian women have slept for thousands of years before you, and will sleep for centuries yet to come. Your daily life a thread in an immense tapestry of human experience. Your name won't survive in historical records. Your face won't be carved in temple walls. Your achievements won't be sung by poets, but you've lived fully in your moment, loved deeply within your circumstances, worked tirelessly for your household's survival, and participated in the great human project of transforming raw existence into something meaningful and beautiful. The stars wheel slowly overhead, marking time's passage. The Nile flows dark and eternal. The desert breathes its ancient silence. And you sleep, dreaming dreams that connect you to the divine, to your ancestors, to your descendants, to all of humanity across all of time. You sleep, and in sleeping, you rest in the same peace that will eventually claim queens and commoners alike, the great equalizer that reminds everyone that beneath titles and wealth and power, we're all simply human, all simply passing through this mysterious existence, all simply trying to find meaning, connection, and love in the brief span of years we're given. Sweet dreams, traveller. Your journey through an Egyptian woman's day has ended, but her life continues, repeating these patterns, creating these moments, finding these small joys and bearing these constant burdens. She'll wake tomorrow and do it all again, as will her daughters and their daughters after them. The endless cycle of feminine labour and love that sustains civilization itself, that transforms survival into culture. That makes human life not merely possible but meaningful, beautiful, and worth living. End of script. Sweet dreams.